Not just in Grey's Anatomy, but in our lives, everything comes to an end at some point. Unfortunately, for some fans, Richard Webber's moment has already arrived, and it should be the definitive end. In this video, we will recall the moment when Richard Webber lost his life for a few moments, and you will tell me if this should have been his end. And today, I'm going to reveal to you how this will happen. So click the like button and subscribe to our channel to receive all the latest updates from the world of Grey's Anatomy. Let's get into our video. During episode 24 of the 9th season of Grey's Anatomy, amid a storm that gave the episode the name Perfect Storm, we lost Richard Webber for a few moments. That day, Richard was operating on Bailey's patient in a dark operating room. The hospital was without power, and the generator had not been activated. Richard tells the nurse to get him a lamp. The monitors switched to battery power, but the echo did not. Richard then instructs Shane to investigate what happened, and Owen arrives with the electrician, Frank, to check if Webber needs anything. Frank has no idea why the emergency lights didn't come on, but Richard remembers a defect that occurred in the generator in 2006 due to air in the fuel system, which Frank assured would never happen again. However, Richard says it's better for Frank to go check the generator. Sometime later, in another operating room, Christina struggles to find the source of the patient's bleeding with all the shadows caused by the improvised lights. Richard makes everyone turn off the lights and instructs Christina to listen to the heart. Christina does so and locates the leak in the ventricle. The team turns the lights back on as she starts to fix the leak. Another life was about to be saved thanks to Richard's help, and Christina thanks him for making her a better doctor. After leaving the operating room, Richard wonders where the electrician, Frank, is, as he couldn't fix the emergency lights, so he decides to go to the basement to find him. When he gets there, Richard finds Frank lying on the floor near the circuit box. Richard starts CPR, and while trying to save him, we hear sounds of electricity crackling around him. He manages to rescue Frank, and then requests help to have Frank sent for evaluation for acute myocardial infarction. Frank tells Richard that he was right about the air in the fuel system. The solenoid prevented the injector from firing. Richard apologizes for yelling at him, and Frank responds by saying that now he had managed to fix the problem, telling Richard he just needed to press the transfer switch to restore electricity. Frank is taken upstairs, and Richard starts looking for the switch. After that, he was not seen again. Later, we find Ben, who now sees Bailey walking around the hospital. He is impressed with what she did, saving the patient, but she is agitated because she cannot find Richard. This is because he had previously tried to help her, and she blamed him and called him a drunk. Ben says Richard knows her better than she thinks, and she says she owes everything to Richard and asks if Ben knows where he is. And then we reach the end of the episode, which concludes the 9th season, hearing Meredith's voice saying that only in the moments of silence after the storm do we find out who was strong enough to survive. At this moment, we see Richard's motionless body lying on the wet ground near the flaming circuit box, his coat burned and smoking. Then we return to the first episode of the 10th season, where, in the hospital's basement, the circuit box is still sparking, and Richard is still lying motionless on the floor. The sound shows his pager receiving messages. The hospital was in chaos. A bus had crashed, and there was also a landslide. Now Derek and Owen were also looking for Richard, but no one had any idea he was in the basement, between life and death. Bailey says the mayor is on the phone and wants information about the landslide victims. She says she informed him that it was too early to tell, but he wants to hear that from Owen. She then looks around and doesn't see Webber, so she approaches Shane and says she wants him to find Dr. Webber, but he needs to deliver a message from Derek to Heather and says he couldn't do what she asked. Bailey then asks if it's life-threatening, as not having enough general surgeons in the ER is life-threatening, so now he needed to find Webber. So now we see Shane. He didn't know what to do, if he would find Heather or look for Richard first, but then a light at the end of the tunnel appeared. He met Christina in the elevator, and she told him Richard had gone to the generator. Shane and Christina didn't know where the generator was, so Shane continued his search, which led him to encounter Heather. Heather then approaches and gives him lidocaine. She wants to go to Derek, but Shane tells her Derek wants her to go find Dr. Webber, which is a lie. Shane wanted to help Derek in her place and selfishly deceived her. Heather was now the one searching for Richard, who by this time had been suffering in the basement for a long time. Shortly afterward, Heather manages to discover where the generator is and enters the basement, where she finds the spot where the circuit box is on fire. Heather then sees Richard's motionless body, which makes her panic, and as she approaches, without noticing the floor, she falls into an electrified puddle and is electrocuted. Not only that, but during the fall, she hits her head. Her body lies motionless on the ground. At that moment, Richard's eyes open, and he watches her fall to the ground. After this sad moment, the episode continues for a long time until Stephanie finds Bailey and delivers a message from Owen. But Bailey says she's busy, so she can't help. She asks where Richard is. Stephanie doesn't know, so Bailey says someone needs to find him. Meanwhile, Shane, who knew he had sent Heather to the generator to look for Richard, goes down to the basement, where he finds both of them unconscious. They bring the two to the ER, and Bailey gives a report on their condition. The young woman suffered a head trauma, and her pupils are unresponsive. As Bailey says this, Heather begins to have seizures. Derek comes in and rolls her onto her side. He yells at Ross, who is stunned, and they take her away. Bailey continues working on Weber with Christina, and the two disagree on how to treat Richard. Richard was brought upstairs and resuscitated. Christina had to insert a balloon without a fluoroscope. Upon discovering that his lactate was 6, Bailey palpated Richard's abdomen and decided to operate, saying he could have intra-abdominal tissue damage. Christina disagreed, saying they first needed to let his heart stabilize. They brought in Owen to make the decision, but they had to consult his file to see what his health directive said about extraordinary measures. They were looking to find out who would make his medical decisions in such cases. Meredith is surprised to find that she was named Richard's medical proxy. Meredith says he can't do this without asking first, but Bailey says he can. Christina says he revised it when Adele died, and Owen says she needs to make a decision. Christina and Bailey present their sides. Bailey says, "You trust me. You gave my name to your baby." But Christina reminds them there are no personal relationships. They debate a bit more, and then tell Meredith to make her choice. She decided she couldn't make the decision rationally, so she asked them to test the lactate again and instructed them to operate if it was above 6. His lactate was 9, so they took him to surgery. Derek and Shane are operating on Heather. Shane is optimistic. Derek says they will do what they can and hope for the best. The episode ends, and the conclusion in the following episode is harrowing. Heather didn't make it, and despite Derek's efforts, she didn't survive the accident. On the other hand, Catherine Avery arrived at Gray Sloan Memorial Hospital, and as soon as she found out that Richard had been taken into surgery, she insisted they close, which they did. She also decided she wanted to transfer him to a different hospital, but Meredith told them to operate on him again. In that surgery, they found necrotic tissue under the pancreas and removed it. Bailey was right. After the surgery, Richard woke up. After this, many fans questioned the series' decision to save Richard, and I want to know what you think about it. Comment